you can drink all the ayahuasca, all the peyote, all the mushrooms. There are some things that can only be cast out through prayer. Right now,
Yep.
I didn't acknowledge this yet. Right. And so I'm still like fighting this demon. I'm still fighting this thing. And what I end up doing is I end up pulling this thing out of my body. And at first it felt like it was a few inches wide, and it kept getting wider as I was like untangling string. It felt like string was coming out of my body, like all over the place. But in the energetic field, like once it left the physical body into like the spiritual realm, it felt like it was 6 feet wide. It felt like a huge anaconda that was like 200,000 feet long. I tried counting how long this thing was, but it was just massive.
Welcome to the Enlighten Up podcast, where I am going to take you into a deep exploration of what it means to exist in this current reality. We are going to raise your vibes, open your mind, expand your heart, and dive deep into the wondrous mysteries and possibilities of this lifetime. There's been a spiritual catalyst that has set in motion the awakening process of many across the globe to return to the knowingness of self and unite what has been separated. Together, we're going to bring light into that darkness. We're going to remember the joy of living. But most of all, we're going to turn up the volume of our own eternal power and do the thing we're here to do. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Enlighten Up podcast. You guys are in for such a treat today. I'm so excited to finally bring you Clark Varin, who is a author of the book Healed by Faith and host of the podcast Healed by Faith. Clark and I met at a networking event a few weeks ago, back in August, and it just seems like our plant medicine journeys drew us together. And I'm so fascinated by your journey, Clark, and I'm so excited to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Oh, I am doing fantastic. And yeah, we definitely have a knack for turning some business talk into some healing plant medicine talk.
It's the best kind, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
It's the best kind of business. Your journey, we're just going to warn everyone ahead of time. Just when you think it can't get crazier than what we're letting you know and what he's sharing with you, trust me, you've only hit the tip of the iceberg. We're going to be going deep. There are things that are going to have your jaw on the floor. And I would say to you, if you feel like it right now, go pour yourself a glass of coffee, like a cup of coffee, maybe a tea if it's the morning. If it's the evening, a glass of wine might do you great. I don't know, but you're going to be in for the long haul. Settle in, get comfy, get cozy, and prepare to be amazed. So what I love, Clark, about your healing journey is that it takes a lot of twists and turns. It's just when you think you found the cure, so to speak, there's another layer or there's another hurdle. And where it ultimately ends up is what I think is the most beautiful part. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. So why don't we start with your healing journey and how this all started? Because I find that the healing journey is often one of our greatest avenues of really understanding not just who we are, but how powerful we can be when we trust in that which created us.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, my illness started in Haiti, of all places. And I was sick for about 5 years. And I thought it was some kind of stomach infection.
How old were you when you were in Haiti?
That was like 2018. So like 23.
Okay.
Yep. And that's 5 years ago now. I'm 28. I finally figured out what the cause of the disease was last year. So for 4 years, I didn't even know what was making me sick. And when I came home from Haiti, I had this stomach infection. I had lost 40 pounds like within a few weeks. I mean, I was barely able to eat like a small ball of rice.
Okay,
Uh,
so pause right there. So you're in Haiti. Why are you in Haiti? Are you just on vacation?
so I was actually on like a mission trip,
Okay.
and I mean, we were there like basically setting up some soccer programs and feeding children and whatnot. But on the last day, I ended up giving a microloan to a guy in Haiti for $200, and he was making like $3 a day. And $200, by the way, it's like a 6 months income for someone in Haiti. But this guy went from making like $300 a day to, with that $200, he bought a fishing net and started making $20 a day. So what I ended up discovering is like that's actually a significant part of the story, because it's because of that event that I got ill.
Okay. So you helping someone else is why you got ill. We need to
Yeah.
extrapolate on that.
Yeah. And so you'll find out in just a second. But basically, when I went home, I had no idea why I was sick. Um, I went to all these doctors. They couldn't find any bacteria infection. There was no virus. There was no parasites. All they could see was just like my body was like deteriorating, and they didn't really know why. And so that lasted for several years, where I was just super sick, energy drained, gut problems all the time. And then I developed such bad nerve pain last year that I had to just put everything on pause, like stop it all. Um, and the reason why nobody was able to figure out what was wrong with me is because our medical system is set up to observe the physical causes and symptoms and whatnot. And what I had was a spiritual disease.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I started working with plant medicine, specifically ayahuasca, which, DMT is the spirit molecule. They say it opens you up to the spiritual world. Once I started using ayahuasca, then I started to be able to actually observe the spiritual roots of my disease. And that's where the story starts to get really wild.
Okay. Okay. So during this time that you were sick, explain to the audience like exactly what you were feeling and how that was for you just in your day to day. Like, and because that wears you down when you're
Mm-hmm.
constantly sick and you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there was a point where it's like the first thing that I would think about right when I wake up in the morning is like, oh, how bad is it going to be today? Like, how bad is the nerve pain going to be? Because I had excruciating nerve pain. Like, I would move in any direction and my body would hurt. So I'd wake up, how bad is it going to be today? And then I would roll over and I would find out. Um, and then the rest of my day was like dragging myself out of bed, forcing myself to do yoga when I like didn't want to because it hurt so bad. Going to acupuncture, going to chiropractic appointments, doing a lot of massage therapy. My massage therapist he was a sports massage therapist. Like he went deep, right? And I was there like screaming on the table because it hurt so good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but ultimately, none of this stuff really was getting down to the root of the problem. It was able to like temporarily relieve some pain or some symptoms or whatever. But the only time that I actually had a big relief was in deep meditation. And this is like the first miracle that happened in this story is I was actually, trying all this stuff, going crazy, like trying Chinese medicine and exercising constantly and whatnot. And then a book showed up at my door. Actually, it was a meditation guide showed up at my door from Amazon. I didn't order it. It wasn't in my orders. I had to double check Amazon. None of my friends claimed to have sent it to me, right? It was just this mysterious package that said how to meditate. And this was God, like, he's like, you're going at 100 miles per hour. I can't speak to you when you're moving so fast. So he had to like blatantly put this message in my way, like how to meditate. So I finally, after that point, I was like, the universe is speaking to me. Like I didn't fully believe in God yet, but I was
So
like, the
that's kind of
universe.
crazy because if you didn't order it and you if correct me if I'm wrong, but when you told me there was no record of it in your Amazon account as being ordered by you.
Yeah, no, it was perfectly addressed to me.
Yeah.
but nobody ordered it.
Yeah, but it was sent to you. Okay. So
It was sent to me.
definitely that is an act of God. You know, that is a divine orchestration of the universe, God, whatever anyone wants to call it. But
Yeah.
that is just something you can't explain, but there's a greater force at work here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And the result of that was through meditation, just like a week and a half later, I started taking my meditation super seriously, like twice a day, 2 hours a day. And after like a week and a half of this, I received this massive healing in my back. Like the pain in my back just like melted. And
Really?
finally, for the first time, I was like able to like live life again without being in excruciating pain.
Was there anything going in that particular meditation? Do you recall anything that was there a certain technique you were using or anything that was kind of coming up to the surface in your conscious awareness during that meditation that melted that pain? Like, or how can you describe that?
Well, I was following a Joe Dispenza meditation. Like he does this like blessing of the energy centers where you kind of
Mm-hmm.
focus on each one of the chakras. But honestly, I don't think it had anything to do with like specific chakra healing or anything like that. It was really just the act of being still.
Okay.
And I later learned why being still is so important to spirituality is because we're made up of all these different energy layers. And when we're constantly moving and we're constantly in a stressful state, those energy layers are super compressed. And being still allows those energy layers to open up a little bit. And by
Mm-hmm.
opening up a little bit, then stuff can move out.
Okay. All right. So you finally get your first bout of relief through meditation.
Yeah. And
And when was this exactly? How long ago was this?
oh man, this is probably something like uh April of last year or
Okay.
May
Okay.
of
So
last
this is
year.
when your first, okay. So you, oh my gosh. So you had it for almost 4 years. And it wasn't until almost your fourth year that you started to finally get your first real sense of relief.
Yeah. And honestly, it got really bad leading right up to that because for 8 months, I was in a really high stress situation. I was raising capital. I was meeting with a lot of wealthy people. And honestly, what happened too at that time was I started to become attracted to like things of this world, attracted to
Material stuff.
wealth,
Yeah.
material stuff and whatnot. And I started to make more money and be more focused on that than I was on like the good work that I've been doing. I swear, like one of the reasons why my health was like survivable for the last 5 years is because my day-to-day work is helping people in poverty escape poverty in Africa. Right. So it's like I'm constantly doing good stuff. But also, I realized through this journey is that just doing good isn't enough to heal yourself. God wants faith. He wants your full commitment. He wants a full relationship with you. And when you have faith, then he can start to really move through you and start to heal you spiritually.
And I think it's important for the audience to know right now, too. You were you raised Christian?
Yeah, I was raised Christian. And then in college, I kind of started to stray away. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, what's kind of funny is that when I was like 20 years old, really starting to like question my faith for the first time, like my own belief system, creating for myself, I came across ayahuasca. And when I came across ayahuasca, I was like, I want to try that to know whether or not God is real. So this was
Okay.
like an intention that I set when I was like 20,
Oh,
right?
wow.
And it wasn't until 7 years later that I finally got to try ayahuasca, and that intention was finally fulfilled.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. So continue on. So you do this meditation, you finally feel your first sense of relief. Then
yeah.
what?
And so what's crazy is I have a friend who tells me, he's like, yeah, I also had really chronic back pain. He got in a motorcycle accident, and he's like, I tried ayahuasca and angels came down and like healed my back. And I was like, next time I get the chance, next time I hear about ayahuasca, period, I'm going. Right. And just a week after that, a friend tells me, is like, hey, there's going to be this legend, like legend of legends. He's called the Dalai Lama of the Amazon. He's actually served ayahuasca to the Dalai Lama, and he's like, this guy is going to be in town. Do you want to come to the ceremony? And I was like, at 100% I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a 2 night thing, like Friday night, Saturday night. And when you're sitting in an ayahuasca ceremony, it goes all night. We're sitting upright in a circle. And what I knew already about the medicine through my research is that this is a spiritual medicine. It's like their religion, where they take this and they pray. and it was so eye-opening seeing how like indigenous people work with plant medicine, because they use it as a tool for prayer. That's
Yeah.
it. That's the whole purpose of it all. It's like, how do we get even closer to God? It's one of their tools to be able to do that. And so the first night goes by and not a ton happens, to be honest. I get a big emotional healing. I felt like the divine love of like Mama Ayahuasca, that unconditional love that like cracked my heart open. But then it was the second night in that first series when I took my first cup and I felt just this warm medicine go through my entire body, and it was healing every cell in my body. It felt like I was going through surgery, right? And I go up and I take my second cup, and the surgeons now are like seriously rewiring like every cell in my body. And when I opened my eyes from the second cup, I was like in complete awe. And I was like stunned. I was like, God is real. I could feel him in everything. Like I could feel his presence in the ground. I could feel his presence in the stars. I could feel his presence in everything that was alive. And I could feel the energy of the heavens. I felt the energy of our ancestors. And I looked up at our ancestors, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I felt sorrow. And I was like, what does this mean? What does it mean that there's like sorrow in heavens? And in that moment, God like gave me two things. One, he gave me a calling, right? He called me to do something for him. I didn't know what it was, but I felt a calling through like my third eye, And then the other thing was he downloaded information through me faster than I could even like interpret it. I was trying to like process it all, but I could feel the information was just like in my body now. And so I go through this insane experience. I'm totally connected for like hours. I'm like in the complete presence of God. This is going on like way later than the ceremony. And I'm totally connected. And for the first time, I believe fully in God. It was undeniable evidence that God is real. And that was the first thing he really had to do for me to be able to proceed.
Yeah.
Because he needed me to have complete faith, right? The first step to any spiritual healing journey is actually just believing that God is real. Like believing that there is a God, that he showed me he was all merciful, all loving, all powerful, all wise.
Yeah.
Like there's someone who's watching after you. And oftentimes when it comes to our illnesses, he's trying to wake us up. And this is how it's been for thousands of years. Indigenous people, when I got to really practice with them even more, they started to realize it's like diseases and illnesses and things like that are oftentimes a result of unsolved issues in our lives, unsolved emotional traumas.
For sure.
For me,
I totally believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, I have an incredible book that talks about the emotional connection to a lot of physical ailments. And every time I'm working with a client and I'm using that, it's spot on, like without fail, 100% of the time. And what I love so much about what you're saying here too, is that, this divine reconnection meetup with God, where he reintroduces himself to you in a way that is so undeniable, right? Where you now know without a shadow of a doubt that God is real. And that will give you the foundation. That's almost like your North Star for everything going forward. And I recall for myself a similar kind of it's a parallel, but not on the same level as what you experienced, where I did 10 days of silent meditation in the jungle of Costa Rica. And on day 4 is when I had my most spiritual experience through meditation alone, where I left my body. I experienced myself as pure energy. But the purpose of that was, what I felt was, I am perfect exactly as I am. I don't want to change anything. Everything's perfect, beautiful. I was appreciative. Like there was nothing I wanted to change. And at that stage in my life, everything is what I wanted to change about myself, about my life, about the world. Like, like there was no peace. There was so much judgment and criticism and everything. And so when I came out of that, I immediately just burst into tears, sadness. And it was more of sadness for realizing I just spent the last 31 years of my life not appreciating my own beauty, okay, as a soul, as a person here in this life, but also it gave me the foundation of everything I needed to do on my own journey of self-love, because that's where my journey of self-love started, and understanding that. And so for you, yours was understanding God is real.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes your North Star, your lodestone,
Mm-hmm.
right? In your whole journey. You
Mm-hmm.
can't continue without it.
Oh, I would never have survived. I would have
Yeah.
died. Yeah. Not because I would have woken something up and I would not have understood it, you know? But like after that happened, after I realized, hey, God is real, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to go figure out what this ayahuasca stuff is all about.
Yeah, I don't blame you. An experience like that, you're like, get me on the next plane to the Amazon.
Yeah. So I went to another retreat, and that retreat, what it showed me was, it showed me a couple of things. It's like, you're really sick, like seriously sick, and you need to figure out what this is. And I could feel that the ayahuasca was actually helping. It was actually healing me. No doctor, no Western medicine, no lab test, nothing was able to heal me except for this. This was the only thing that I knew actually worked. And it revealed to me actually a little bit of the nature of my illness. It showed me, hey, whatever's happening in your gut, that gut issue that you think you had, is also what's causing the nerve pain.
Okay.
And it's making you infertile. And I was like, whoa.
The way ayahuasca showed you this.
The ayahuasca made it just super clear to me. It was just a knowing. It's just,
Yeah.
you just know. It's
I
hard to,
totally understand.
yeah, it's hard to explain, but you just know. And so I went to go get the lab test, and I was like, yep, you're infertile, like that. So I confirmed it with Western medicine, but the ayahuasca is what like showed me this. So it's basically like, hey, you're not gonna be able to have kids if you don't figure this out. So I went down to the Amazon, and then after I went down there, it was like literally, I was at this healing center in like one of the deepest parts of the Amazon with some master healers, like a group of master healers were guiding us. And I was just studying the spiritual nature of the world. It was like it was one of the most incredible learning experiences I've ever had. And at the end of it was the Indigenous Ayahuasca Conference, where I got to learn from literally hundreds of the most powerful healers in the Amazon.
That's so cool. So like you've just, okay, because you're down there for a long time. You're not just going down there for like 3 nights a week. You're going down there. Let everyone know how long you're going down there, and what the impact is for you, because right now you're now stepping away from work. Like you're like, my only work right now is this
Mm-hmm.
journey.
Yeah, 100%. So I initially thought it was going to be a 10-day trip. And then like,
Okay.
hey, you can extend all the way to the conference if you want. So I made a big donation to like actually fund the conference. And I helped like build the auditorium and stuff and whatnot. So it ended up being 40 days that I was down there. So it's so funny because like that's how long that Jesus faced spiritual warfare
Yeah.
for, it
Yeah.
was
No.
40 days in the wilderness.
40
And
days. Yeah. And also from an astrological point of view, the planet Venus, when she goes into the underworld, which is, the feminine archetype of our sky, so to speak, love, she goes down for 40 days or 40 nights, and she reemerges as, the morning star. So it's interesting how there's that number is, I think, important.
mm-hmm. And so the way it like kind of broke down, the way the 40 days broke down is like the first few days I had massive healings. Like the first healing was totally emotional, getting rid of sorrow and a blocked heart. It's amazing how that's like the first thing that God focuses on always, is like a lack of love. It's like love is the cure. And then the second day I ended up puking something that felt like it came out of my brain. And so I drank like 7 cups of ayahuasca that day. Like I was going really deep for it being like my second day in the jungle. But the medicine was guiding me. It's like, keep drinking more. And as I kept drinking more, literally like what I was puking, it was coming out of my back, it was coming out of my brain. And then as I puked it out, light passed through my head. And I now realize that was actually one of the pages who was bringing down the light to me. It rewired my entire brain. Like all of the damage that whatever this was that came out of my brain, whatever the damage it had done, was like completely rewired, completely fixed. And I was back to health. Like for the first time, I felt like I could think straight. I felt like I could really listen to people in conversations. I felt like I had focus and determination back. And I didn't realize how bad this was affecting me until I achieved perfect health.
Okay.
So
So
God was,
yeah, okay. Sorry, I don't mean to pause you there, because I don't think people understood that your mental cognition was severely affected during this illness.
oh
Like,
yeah. Yeah, that was one of the worst symptoms actually. So because I had nerve pain, it affected my entire nervous system. And so there were days when I would wake up like not knowing where I was. I was having like tremendous memory loss, like not being able to remember things from like 30 minutes ago, much less like the day before. So I was having like really bad just nervous system breakdown entirely.
okay, because I don't want to ruin the story.
Yeah.
You're gonna let the audience know why when
Yeah.
you found out it was HAITI that was the origin of this being sick.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
100%. That's coming
Okay.
up. That's coming up next. So,
Okay.
but what
Oh,
happened
oh,
was
and let
that,
them know what a page is, because not everyone's gonna know.
oh, Page is just a master shaman.
Okay.
I mean, this guy had studied for 40 years. His grandfather was a shaman. His grandfather's grandfather was a shaman, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what what God was showing me was like, hey, this is what perfect health is like, right? And he's
Yeah.
like, this is like, if you finish this journey, this is how you can be again. And so for the next like about like a week later or so, we end up taking ayahuasca with a potato called tenori. And this was so cool because now I'm learning about like all kinds of medicines from the Amazon. I ended up taking like 7 different kinds of medicines when I was down there and learning about all, like there's so much more advanced stuff beyond ayahuasca that people don't really even know about yet because it's not
Mm-hmm.
super popular yet. But Tenori is like a laser that scans through your entire body and finds any energetic imbalances, digs all those up, and then the ayahuasca gathers it and gets it out of your body. So I'm in like deep meditation with this Tenori, and the scan goes down, and then it hits my sacrum. And once it hits my sacrum, worms like pop out of my sacrum. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe, like, what is this that's inside of me? Right. What's crazy is I had felt these things moving around during my Joe Dispenza meditations before, you know,
And
and
you felt them? So you felt that there was something moving inside of you, but you weren't sure what it was?
yeah, I had no idea what it was. I had no idea what it was. And honestly,
Oh, yeah,
I,
because that's the thing. When you start to really heighten your own awareness, you are heightening your own awareness of your physical body, every sensation, and what's should be there and what shouldn't be there.
yeah. And quite honestly, like I didn't have the knowledge of the spiritual world that I needed
Yeah.
in order to identify that
Yes.
this was a spirit.
Yes. Okay.
But
So you,
what I'm
yeah.
about to find out is that these worms are actually spiritual entities,
Mhm.
spiritual parasites living inside of me, feeding off of my nervous system, which is why I had such a bad nervous system breakdowns. And the way that I discover that is I literally like with breath and through like the pressure of my body, I end up pushing this thing up to my head and out the top of my head. And as I'm doing that, I'm sitting super still, trying to feel, is anything going on? Like, is it gone? And in my vision, there's this bright white light, and it's literally angels trying to bring my attention to something, right? And I can feel that there's something sucking on the outside of my face, and it felt like a leech was attached to the outside of my body. And I take my hand and I wipe this thing away, and it just disappears into the ether. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have spiritual parasites. Like this to me didn't even seem possible, you know? Like I had just now discovered that God is real. Now I'm discovering that spiritual entities are real. And these happen to be, obviously, there's angels and there's demons, right? Spirits of light, spirits of darkness. I had demons in my body. And I was, of course, observing the spiritual world through the ayahuasca and seeing that angels are real as well. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. And a few nights later is when I really start to uncover like spiritual warfare. They talk about, I never had read the Bible at this point, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like they talk about spiritual warfare in the Bible and people kind of dismiss it, you know? It's
Yeah.
like, no, spirit,
It's
like
it,
legit warfare between entities who are sentient fighting each other, between light and darkness
it's a
that
real
are,
thing.
yeah, they're trying to control our minds. They're trying to control what's going on in the physical world. And obviously the dark is fighting on the side of evil, trying to, you know, get us to destroy our planet, destroy ourselves, destroy all things that are good. And then our job on this earth is to become warriors of light. That is literally all of our jobs. But we can't even start to do that until we start to acknowledge that spiritual warfare is real and that we're all part of the army.
Okay, so you felt these parasites kind of coming up from your sacrum, and you used a technique to kind of push them out with your breath, so they came out of your head. You then realized there's more, and you swiped one away. So what happened next?
Well, what happens next is I had two more parasites, right? That three of them came out of my sacrum into like my back. The first one came out, the second one came out, the third one, I get it like up to my head. And at that time, more parasites come from my sacrum into my gut. And now at this point, it's like, oh, I can't do the pushing to get this thing out of my head because my gut was so wrecked.
So it's
So
basically like it released like more soldiers.
it released more soldiers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And these soldiers at this time are tiny little leeches, right? They're
Yeah.
so tiny. But that night, I tried drinking more ayahuasca. I tried getting rid of this stuff out of my gut, but I was so destroyed by the end of the night from fighting and pushing. I
It's
was so tired.
exhausting.
Yeah, it was exhausting. I couldn't get this thing out of my head. And so as it got into my head, it started to like reproduce. It started to have like little babies and whatnot. And I started to get like pretty scared. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I just screwed up big time. Right. And so the coming ceremonies, I'm literally just going to spiritual warfare with this parasite that keeps reproducing, keeps getting worse. And I'm fighting against it. But as I'm fighting against it, it's fighting against me. And so the medicine is literally like teaching me what to do. Like it's giving me visions of like, and kind of guiding me. Right. Well, this parasite, for example, at one point goes into my eyes and blocks my spiritual vision. And I'm now like going in this blind, right? And so I just start praying to God, asking God for guidance. And the wisdom of God, I noticed, comes through like the back of the head, you know, like kind of where Jewish people wear the yarmulke. And the parasite came and like covered that part of my head. And I was like, it's trying to blind me. It's trying to block my ability to pray. And it's getting more evil and it's getting smarter, right? The more I fought against it, the worse that it got
It's almost like
until,
the smarter you got, the smarter it got.
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I for 40 days become like, I got really proud of like the work that I had done.
Hold on a second,
Yeah.
because I might be mistaken here. But when it started to block your vision, did you go up to your page and is that when he saw that you actually had a parasite?
Oh, I'm going up to the page for healings every ceremony multiple times. You know, I'm like the problem child in the group.
So like what's he doing to assist you? Because if you can't see and you're going up there for more medicine, like what's his reaction to you?
So they do these crazy healings. Have you ever seen Avatar: The Way of Water?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Avatar: The Way of Water, you like someone almost drowns or something like that. And they bring them up to the surface and the doctors start working on them and the doctors are like, everything seems fine. And then the avatars, they start like taking I forgot exactly what it was, but they start like sucking the spirit out of someone and like processing it for them. Right. This is like, that's not fictional, you know, that's like how it works. So the pages, what they do is first they do this reading. So they chew this plant called yoenki, which is the sacred potato that gives them spiritual vision inside of your body. And they'll put their hand on your head And through that, they're tuning the Yuanqi. They're able to read through you and see what's going on. So they're doing a diagnosis on you without you having to tell them anything, right? They can also see any spirits that are attached to you. And so he's reading down through me, and he's healing me through like different techniques with agua florida, which is like rose water, through tobacco smoke, like oftentimes like blowing tobacco smoke like through my head into my like body. And he's doing like all these crazy healing things, and they freaking work. Like it's incredible how they work. It's seriously, it feels like magic because we can't see what's going on, but to them it's a science because they can see the cause and effect of what they're doing, right? And so this is where science and spirituality meet.
Yeah.
Which is wild. Like one of the pages, he in the Amazon during the ayahuasca conference, he said he stood up, by the way, 105 years old, in perfect health, didn't need glasses, didn't need a cane, nothing. He said, is this not a science? He's like, of course this is a science, because we're studying the cause and effect of what's going on in the spiritual world. And we can observe it because we work with all these different plants that give us the spiritual vision to be able to see what's going on that other people can't see, right? And so the page, I mean, I am fully in belief of this because I've seen the page literally peeling parasites off my body and like throwing them away, you know, like discarding parasites that are coming out of me. And I'm like, this guy sees what's going on. No, everyone else there thinks it's my imagination. Like everyone else in the group is like, Clark's going through something real crazy. But the healers, of course, they actually were like, they could see what was happening. And they gave me this medicine, and it's just a vial, right? And they're like, put 4 drops of this in a glass of water, like every morning before breakfast. And so I started doing that. And then the next ceremony, whatever they gave me worked wonders. And parasites, like 60 parasites, just fell out of my body. Like they were just coming out of me like with ease. You know, I didn't have to fight. The medicine was just like doing its job. And so that same night, I'm also having visions of dragons. I'm like, what is this? Chinese dragons, dozens of Chinese dragons. And the shaman comes up to me and he's like, hey, can I have the dragana, sangrada dragona? And I'm like, the agua florida? Like, I don't speak Portuguese. The translator next to me, he's like, no, he wants the dragon's blood. I'm like, dragon's blood? That's what this stuff is called that you gave me? I've been seeing dragons all night. And what's wild is like just knowing that they name this stuff dragon's blood shows you that they know the spiritual nature of plants. And they
it's
observe.
Not just for the fun of it. Like they're not.
Yeah, it's not just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
What's a cool name for this tree, you know, this tree resin? It's like they know the spiritual nature of the plants. They know that although it's a tree, it has the spirit of a dragon. And this is the knowledge that has been lost in Western medicine. And this is the knowledge that the ancient people still retain. And it's only because of these people's ancient knowledge that I was able to figure out what was wrong with me. But while I was there in the Amazon, I drank, by the time I was done with 40 days, felt so confident working with ayahuasca that I was able to drink 10 cups a night. But my nights literally were like, drink 10 cups of ayahuasca and I'd be puking the whole time, like 30, 40 times a night. I just spend the night in a bush. Once I'm done puking, I'd go get another cup of ayahuasca and I'd keep puking. And so while my time in Brazil taught me the spiritual nature of the world and the ancient way of healing of our ancestors, it isn't ultimately what healed me. And what healed me ended up being so much more beautiful and so much easier and so much more graceful than the fight that I was putting forth when I was in Brazil.
Yeah. So, and that's that truly is just the highlight of this whole story. So you're in the Amazon, you've done your 40 days and you're starting to really understand some of the medicines. And that's so cool. The Yuanqi, you're telling me that is something that a shaman is only allowed to take when their heart is pure.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't do the work beforehand, like if you're trying to obtain this spiritual gift without first cleansing yourself completely, it can kill you. So there can't be an ounce of hatred in your heart, is what they say. There can't be an ounce of anger or hatred. And it's kind of like God makes you earn the spiritual gifts, you know? He makes you cleanse yourself completely. Once you're cleansed completely, you can have this gift because God knows that you're going to use it for the greater good.
Yeah, it's
Isn't that
kind of like
beautiful?
in ancient Egyptian times, what is it? The god Mat. Was it Mat? Who weighed the heart of a person, like, and if it was as light as a feather, you went on into the next spirit realm, or if it wasn't, you had to reincarnate or something like along those lines. Um, it's kind of similar in that aspect, but it's true. Like, this is why, and I'm sure you're going to agree with this, because, you know, someone like you needs a very legit, well-trained shaman. And ayahuasca journeys specifically, but any kind of plant medicine journey, is not to be taken lightly. And it's not so much about the plant itself, although there's that component, but it's about the preparation of the plant by the shaman, the prayers that go into it. Like, the prayers are so important.
Yeah, it's so important. And I mean, I've heard terrible, like horror stories about ayahuasca before, because people drink ayahuasca with like a neo shaman who doesn't know what they're doing. And the reality is you're opening yourself up to the spiritual world. And the spiritual world, of course, there's angels, but there's also demons.
Yeah.
And there were people there in Brazil who were drinking ayahuasca to try to undo a possession, like a spirit had possessed them, that happened during a previous ceremony when they were sitting in with one of these neo shamans who like has drank ayahuasca a couple dozen times and thinks they're a pro. In Brazil, they require 10 years of study with the medicine under a master before they're even allowed to serve medicine.
Yeah, it's not something to be taken lightly. And I think there has to be a well-founded respect for the medicine and the journey of the actual shaman themselves. So I just say that because, you know, I've been talking a lot about plant medicine on my channel since I started a little over a year ago with my first ayahuasca journey. And I think it's just, you've got to do your research. You've got to really look into who's going to be facilitating your journey, because it is the facilitator, the shaman's duty to make sure that the space is clean, clear, safe, protected. Like, they need to know how to deal with entities that come in, because clearly there are. So so you do this 40 days in the Amazon, and this is where I want people to know, like, you think it's like, this is where it's starting to end? Like, you just jumped on the ride, just so you know.
Just jumped on the ride.
You just jumped on the ride. We haven't even got to
That's the
close
beginning.
to, yeah. So, okay. So you leave the Amazon. Is that like where most of the story ends? Like, how are you?
Yeah. So basically at that point, I leave the Amazon and I pissed this spirit off, but I wasn't able to get rid of it. And so it fought back, you know, and I actually left in a worse condition than I had started, but I now knew what it was. I knew that it was a spiritual entity. And the thing is, I had a few tools that I had learned about in the Amazon. I had learned about hapeh, which is like a tobacco powder that you blow into your nose, and it like blasts. It basically brings you into a place of meditation, but it can also like blast, you know, bad energy that doesn't belong in your body. You can blast it out. Same thing with like Sananga. I learned to work with these eye drops that are like a whole cleanse, not just for the eyes, but for the entire nervous system. And I had learned to work with the sacred tobacco, the mapacho, and like how to basically like protect myself with mapacho. You blow it on yourself and they say it like makes you invisible to the spiritual world. Basically, the way I felt it was like it rendered the parasites inside of me like dumb, you know, like they wouldn't move. So I have these tools and I'm praying like crazy and I'm trying to meditate and I'm doing all these things. And at this point, I believe in God. Like, I joke that like for these many months after I left the Amazon, it's like I was basically a Muslim because I believed in God, but I thought that Jesus was a prophet, just like Muhammad and Buddha and all this other stuff. And it was that belief that I had to crack in order to finally heal myself. And so for several months, I'm continuing to like deteriorate in my state. this parasite that's inside of me is like getting stronger and bigger and fighting back even more. Until I go to a peyote ceremony over New Year's Eve. And for 4 days, I sit with peyote. And like the first peyote ceremony, I'm like, I don't even know if this is going to work for me or not. So just teach me how you work. And that night, I actually got a full like diagram of the bioenergetics of the human body, like how psychedelics work, how it relates to sleep and how it relates to meditation and whatnot. And it showed me a diagram where it's like at the center of our bioenergetic being is our heart center. And then around it is basically all these different energy layers. And we've got a physical layer. We also have a life force, which is like an electrical layer that overlays your physical layer. You have an emotional, mental, and you have a spiritual layer. And what's happening when we take plant medicine is we're actually opening up those layers and we're becoming aware of stuff that we didn't know even existed. That's why you can dig into deep traumas. You can dig into things that are blocking you spiritually. And then your breath actually helps you clear things out. So that's why breath work is so like useful when it comes even to spiritual healing. It's because it helps you get rid of blockages, helps you process even traumas and memories and stuff like that.
So this is where okay, so we'll take everyone back to the very beginning of the story where you had that first meditation experience where you felt the relief. You said it was because you saw that you learned that the layers actually were able to separate in that meditation of being still. So being still and not being stressed allows for the layers that get compressed from our everyday go, 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 kind of like, we got to do this, we got to do that kind of attitude and mentality to relaxing, opening up. And now the layers you can work with the individual layers. You can clear things out of those layers. And that's what the peyote showed you.
Yeah, so the peyote showed me. And through that, I discovered so much about like spiritual healing because, for example, sleep and meditation, you can get into the same brainwave frequencies as plant medicine, right? So sleep is our body's like natural way of doing this work for us. It's like, hey, you guys aren't going to, if we just let you work all day or do whatever all day, you'll never sleep. So God like shuts us down and is like, okay, we're going to do the healing work that you would never do on yourself if I didn't force you to, right? That's why sleep is so important. And that's why like, if you
that's
don't
why no one can screw with my sleep.
Yeah.
like, no, if I need 9 hours, I'm getting my 9 hours.
Yeah, definitely. And it also taught me like why some things happen. Like, have you ever heard of someone who like takes LSD and it like triggers psychosis? Like you've probably heard of these stories before. That's because they had a demon on their spiritual layer of being. It's always someone who's predisposed to a certain illness, right? Predisposed to schizophrenia or whatever. Well, what's happening is when they take that plant medicine, that demon goes from a spiritual layer down into a deeper layer. It can go into their mental layer. And now all of a sudden they hear voices in their head. And people think they're crazy and that they're losing their mind, but really it's a demon. And if it's a demon, then you need to go get that thing out of your body. And there is a way, there's a way to cure schizophrenia. That's the truth. That's the whole message of my book, Healed by Faith. It's like, there's a way to cure schizophrenia. There's a way to cure so many diseases like Alzheimer's, also caused by a demon. It's a spiritual parasite on the brain that eats away at the brain. And I know that with complete certainty because I actually felt that spirit later on in my journey. But for me, what ends up happening with the peyote is I start working with peyote until this like grand finale day, the fourth day, I feel like it's life or death. Like this thing has gotten into the center of my brain. I'm having symptoms where it's like, if I go home in this state, it'll be lights out for me. I'm sure of it within a matter of days or weeks or whatever. Like my brain will just deteriorate and it'll be one of these mysterious diseases that.
Well, how was this entity interacting with you during your peyote ceremonies before this final day? Like, was it getting irritated? Was it coming close? Like, what were you seeing with this particular entity through the peyote?
These details are pretty gnarly. But for the most part, it felt like I was doing mental jujitsu with something where like the peyote would help me be able to get it out of my body. And I would have to breathe the energy of love into my breath. So literally I would breathe like breath into my heart, fill it with love and blow it at this. And I was like dissipating this entity through the energy of love and through the cleansing breath. And what would happen is I would try to get it out of my body. But if I didn't get it completely out, it would go into an even deeper layer of my being. And so by the end of the third ceremony, I didn't get it out completely in that third ceremony. It came down to the center of my brain, and it felt like it was pinching down on my pineal gland. And that's why I was having all these crazy symptoms, like my vision was being distorted and whatnot. And I mean, this is between ceremonies. This isn't with any medicine in my body. It's like my vision is like wonky, kind of like wearing beer goggles or something. And I have this like deep pain in the center of my brain. Well, the next ceremony, what ends up happening is I end up eating a mega hero's dose of peyote. Like the average person will have maybe like 5 scoops of peyote in a night. I had like 20 plus. I actually like lost track.
Yeah, we're not advocating for that here. You know, like that's just
no,
like that was just your own guidance of like, if I don't do something major, you really thought you were gonna die.
I thought I was gonna die. I was almost certain. I was like, this is God putting me to like the ultimate test of my willpower to survive, right?
Yeah.
So I end up doing that, and then I fill my hand with 2 heaping handfuls, full palms of hapeh, and I blew hapeh into my nose until I ran out of hapeh. And what happened is I literally blasted. Have you seen Avatar: The Last Airbender when he goes beast mode? He creates this like ball of light that just like. I did that with like a ball of light that was like 8 feet wide. You know, it was like my spirit, I was completely in the spirit realm, and I blasted this thing out of my body. And at that point, I can feel this thing is like still in my aura. It's like no longer in my body, but it's trying to like get itself back in. And I'm completely hopeless at this point. I don't have the tools. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have whatever it is in order to get this thing out of me. And at that point, I literally just start praying. I'm like, God, please help me, please. Like if you can do anything for me. And in that moment, I thought back to my neighbor who had told me, you need to build a relationship with Christ because Christ is the energy that can cast out demons. And I'm like, Jesus, if you can do this for me, please help. And in that instant of calling on Christ, the demon died. And it no longer was fighting me. And I was like, of course I had to get this thing out through prayer. You know, of course, God is the only thing that can give something a spirit. And of course, he's the only thing that can take it away. Mm-hmm. And I later learned in the Bible that there was one demon that the disciples couldn't cast out because, you know, Jesus gave his disciples the authority to heal as well. And so there's one demon they couldn't cast out. And they later asked Jesus, like, why couldn't we cast it out? And he's like, this kind can only be cast out through prayer. Mm-hmm. Like ultimately, all the plant medicine, all that, everything in the world, you can drink all the ayahuasca, all the peyote, all the mushrooms. There are some things that can only be cast out through prayer. Right now, yep. I didn't acknowledge this yet. Right. And so I'm still like fighting this demon. I'm still fighting this thing. And what I end up doing is I end up pulling this thing out of my body. And at first it felt like it was a few inches wide, and it kept getting wider as I was like untangling string. It felt like string was coming out of my body, like all over the place. But in the energetic field, like once it left the physical body into like the spiritual realm, it felt like it was 6 feet wide. You know, it felt like a huge anaconda that was like 200,000 feet long. I tried counting how long this thing was, but it was just massive.
Okay. Pause there for a second, because I just want the audience to hear like how amazing this is beyond even like what you're saying. Like, because when you were like using the peyote and the hapeh to breathe this thing out, like you were just like getting it out and out and out, you were almost like, it was like were you pulling on it and just kept pulling on it, like pulling it out of you and pulling it out of you, like, and it just kept going on through breath. Yeah. So you kept breathing it out. And I remember you told me you were doing it for hours.
Like 8 hours, circular breath, deep meditation, circular breath, where I'm like breathing in through my heart and like up through my head and just circulating that, like pulling this thing out of me. And I mean, I ate so much peyote, it was coming out super easy, right? So over the course of like 8 hours, I tried counting. Like I said, it was like 200,000 feet long. It was hundreds of thousands of feet long. And I only got like half of it out before the sun started to come up and the ceremony came to an end. And at the end of the ceremony, there's this really beautiful thing that the shamans do where they give everyone a candle and everyone lights their candle and they ask for a prayer. And there have been miracles that have happened, like women who couldn't conceive using this prayer candle, and like 3 women who couldn't conceive in one ceremony all got pregnant within the next month. So legit miracles
Yes.
happen. Right? It's a beautiful time for everyone else, and I'm still like I'm trying to hold my candle, and there's a 200,000-foot demon still coming out of my body, and and in that moment when I lost concentration of my meditation because of the commotion that was happening around me, another like bat or something came out of the ether and like landed on the back of my head. And it was another one of these parasites. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's another one. And what this taught me was like, I must have a mark on me. There must be something, some kind of spiritual mark on me that makes me exposed to the hellish realm of the spiritual world that these things are from.
Okay. We got to talk about this. This is important. This is important
Yeah.
because I had an instance with this, and anyone who's in my alchemy program from, I want to say the earlier years of, I've got this group community and we've got a private Discord server and I meet with them once a month. We talk about it. So anyways, we all did this event that was about like, going into a place to help kind of save some energy and clear out bad energy. And to be quite honest, it was a learning lesson for all of us. And I realized none of us should have been partaking in any of this. It wasn't our place to go in and to mess with this kind of energy, because this kind of energy was super powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened is a few people got entity attachments from this that were needed to be cleared. And I remember being in meditation and I saw this demon, approach from a distance, and it threw a card at me, and it was literally a calling card, and it was on the floor. And I looked at it and I knew that if I had picked it up, I would have been marked. I know without a shadow of a doubt, it was just for me to even be curious to see, what does this card say? What is this? Would have screwed me over. And I knew in that moment, I said, no. And I said, you are not welcome here. And I blasted the card and it with all this light to make it dissolve. Like I don't want anything to do with this. And I knew in that moment, I was made aware with my own guidance team that had I picked that up, I would have had a mark on me. And like, this is like, you don't mess with this stuff. Like this is part of when you go through this spiritual awakening and journey and starting to understand and getting visions of, other realms and dimensions that are beyond the normal human eye can see in this reality, that you start to play around like a little child. It's like giving a child a loaded gun, that's the akin of like what a lot of us go through in the spiritual world. Now, each and every one of us has our own individual journey, but I would be remiss if I didn't say, if you can avoid dealing with this energy, like, do not call it in. Do not mess with it if you are not spiritually ready to stand your ground, because there are a lot more powerful things out there than what you're probably able to deal with on your own, which your story is a beautiful example of just how powerful this can be. I mean, not everyone has the opportunity to go down to the Amazon for 40 days and do that much ayahuasca with that level of shamans, watching over you and also doing all these healings on you, and then doing more ceremonies, with the kind of dosage that you are also doing is really, well beyond what the normal dose is. So these are just things I think people need to be aware of.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. I mean, black magic's real. I've now met multiple people who have been cursed in Indonesia, who have been cursed in Ethiopia, who have nearly died, who have, after their curse, have had terrible things happen to them. Family members passing away in tragic ways, them losing everything, you know. So this type of black magic is 100% real. And it's talked about in these ancient texts. You read the Bible, there's talk of sorcerers, you know, and it's like most people will read that and be like, okay, that was some kind of superstition or whatever. It's like, no, this is the ancient knowledge of our ancestors that we have forgotten out of thinking we're so wise that we figured it all out. You know, it's like we haven't figured it all out. We haven't figured squat out about how the world works until we acknowledge the spiritual nature of the world, which is the foundation of it all. So for me at this point, once I realized I've got a mark on me, I started to suspect. I was like, this seems like it's black magic. Nobody else around me had experiences like me. Nobody else. Every plant medicine ceremony that I'd gone into since like my early ones with ayahuasca was jujitsu. It was spiritual jujitsu. I was like, what is going on? You know, like nobody else has this thing that's like dodging them and whatnot, that I had to like pin down with my mind and then breathe love at it. It was insane. And this is when I finally acknowledged, I'm like, I'm cursed. I have a mark on me. And without a shadow of a doubt, it came from HAITI. Like the whole illness, I track it all back. When did this all start? I got cursed.
And HAITI is renowned. It is known for its voodoo. It is known for its curse. It's curses that people there, they're very spiritual. There's a lot of dark energy on that island because it's on a particular vortex of light and power. And so there are a lot of forces that are trying to control that. And so you believe that you helped someone you shouldn't have helped. Now, when I say that, I don't mean you shouldn't have helped. Someone else didn't want you to help that person.
Yeah, this guy, I can only imagine. I don't think he was the most humble guy. He probably went back to his like village and was like, some guy just gave me $200 instead of being humble at heart, you know, and just doing the work, you know, being the fisherman and catching the fish and changing his life and giving to the community and whatnot. He probably didn't have the most pure heart, and there's probably someone who had it out for him, you know. And then witch doctors, the people who like cast curses, you know, they also, they're fighting on the spiritual warfare side of evil. So they see an act of kindness, they see an act of light and good. That's the people who their demons are kind of like trying to get them to target. It's like, how much over the last 5 years has this curse weighed me down? How many business deals has it broken for me? Like, I can only imagine. I've gotten this close to like exploding my business in Africa, and then the craziest events happen. You know, an investor gets sick with COVID, and then while they're in COVID, the Ukraine war broke out, which rose interest rates. And it was like, I was a day away from closing like a multi-million-dollar deal, and then everything would fall through like a grand series of terrible events. So yeah, curses are real, and they can hold you back in life. And then obviously demons, since I also had a demon in me, can very much make you sick. And this is what Jesus came to teach us about health. You know, he came to he casted demons out of people, and they were cured. They were no longer deaf. They were no longer blind. And these miracles still exist today. I know someone who has seen every single one of the miracles that you read about in the Bible happen today through prayer, through in the name of Christ. And that time when I cast out when I slayed that demon, was the first time that Jesus saved my life. But there were multiple times, like 3 times afterwards, where he saved my life, until I finally was like, I believe you. Yeah. I freaking believe you.
Okay. So you realize you have a mark, and there's this flying bat-like kind of energy that just lands on you.
Yeah.
Okay. So now what?
So now I go to the shamans and I tell them like, hey, I'm going through some dark magic stuff. And they're like, we know just the guy for you to see. And so just like a 6-hour drive north, there's a guy that they call the Eggman. And the way that he heals is he does a reading on you with eggs. And so he actually prays whatever energy is inside of you. He prays that energy into the eggs, and he cracks the eggs into some water. And his reading was perfectly accurate. He knew everything that was going on with me.
What did he say to you?
Down to a T. So his diagnosis, first of all, he was able to tell me, he's like, hey, if you don't get this out of you, you'll be infertile. I'm like, confirmed. The second thing was like, you have a rope, and rope means this thing will try to kill you. I'm like, oh, I already know that. That happened like a couple weeks ago, where it tried to kill me. And then another thing that he said was, you're full of salt. And so this guy perceives all demonic energy in terms of salt. He's basically, what I learned from working with him is that, like, just like light is all light, you know, it's like there's a darkness that comes from the devil, where his whole kingdom is like fueled by the energy of the devil. Well, the devil like imbues energy into these spirits. That's why this tiny leech, as it received more energy from the devil, turned into this like massive thing, and was able to get stronger and fight back and whatnot, because it's generated more and more salt. And what ended up happening with me was, first of all, he cleanses the salt out of people through plant baths and prayer. And this is the second time where Jesus is coming up like super obvious, because he's known as like one of the best in the world at breaking curses. And he's a Christian. His whole office and everything, it's got like Mother Mary and statues and angels and Jesus and stuff on the wall. And he would give us these plant baths where he gave us like bags of wood. He's like, boil this wood, and after you're done boiling the wood, pour it on your head, like cup by cup in the shower, and rub eggs on you and pray all of the energy into the egg. I started doing these plant baths, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this feels amazing. You know, like it's working. Right. And then he would pray for us at night. And I kid you not, the first time I felt his prayers, it was like a waterfall was coming out of my head into the heavens. And I'm like, this guy, this Christian guy, has the strongest prayers of anyone I've ever worked with. What I discovered, though, is the plant baths. I literally felt like I was in Harry Potter, that this is like potions class, you know?
It's definitely, I mean, it's going even beyond what I'm used to hearing. So I think it's all wild.
Yeah.
But can we just pause for a second before you go further? Just so everyone knows, this kind of medicine man, he perceives demons as salt, as you said. I just want people to know that doesn't mean salt is demonic. Like, because oftentimes we use salt to clear negative energy. Like, you're meant to take a salt bath, or that's why people throw salt over their shoulder. Like, you know, like that's where it all comes from. So this is the way this medicine man is perceiving demons. So whenever you're referring to the salt, that's what you're referring to.
Yeah. Think of it more like bitterness.
Yeah.
The salt here has nothing to do with physical salt. It's like you're salty, you're bitter, you know, that type of thing. So, but anyways, it's the demonic energy. So what happens is, I'm doing these plant blasts, I'm now starting to realize that I can push the parasites into these eggs.
Okay.
And this is the part where it's like, I'm careful about how many times I share this story, but I legitimately, my morning routine for like multiple weeks was go to the grocery store, buy 500 to 700 eggs.
This is so crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy when I was at the grocery store buying 500 to 700 eggs, and then the same
a day. Like a day. Okay, yeah.
I got a major complaint from my Airbnb host one of these times. He's like, "What were you?" He watched the cameras. He's like, "What are you doing with all these eggs?" But I was pushing the parasites into these eggs, and then I cleared myself all the way down to like below my knee, and I was like this close to getting the parasites out of like my leg, and there was one more that was like attached to the back of my head still. And so I go in for a reading, because I'm doing these checkups every 4 days. I'm doing a checkup with the Eggman, right? At first he's like, this is going to take you 8 days. And he's like, it's going to take you 12 days. And the timeline kept going on, because these parasites, what I discovered is they were feeding off of my life force and generating more and more of this demonic energy. And he had never seen anything like this before. I don't know what he thought was going on, but he had some blind spots in his like assessment. And one of the blind spots was something in my head. He didn't notice that there was a parasite in my head. And so when he discovers that, he's like, oh no. And he gives me these like deathly eyes. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, there's salt in your head. And I'm like, yeah, I've had salt in my head since Brazil. Like, there's been salt in my head, you know? And this is when I realized that this salt that he's talking about is actually like an artificial He's literally dissolving the demonic energy out of the spirit and praying it out, right? But it's like an artificial demonic energy now. It's no longer, it's like dissolved, right? So it's no longer like joint as one, which allows him to pray it out easier. But if it gets into your head, what happens is it starts to form a black mass. And this is like an artificially demonic spirit that gets created.
So
And I don't know any.
kind of like a dark helmet.
Yeah, like a dark helmet.
Over your,
And so I don't know,
yeah.
I don't know any of this at this time. And this is also goes back to your point of like, hey, spiritual world's dangerous. Like even this expert, you know, there's a risk in his like form of healing or whatnot. And that's also one of the beauties of like the method that I learned to heal, how I learned to heal myself and cast the demons out of myself in the future doesn't have any risks.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful parts of it all, right?
Yeah.
But I keep working with this Eggman, and he tells me, he's like, you need to get the salt out of your head ASAP. And I'm like, well, let me first get the parasite bodies out of me. There's still some in my leg. If I have one more peyote ceremony, I'm pretty sure I can get it all out. I go into this one more like final grand finale peyote ceremony, and first thing that happens is I pray to Christ. Now I'm all in on Jesus. Like I believe in Jesus. You know, I believe he's super powerful. I've seen his work like multiple times popping up. But I haven't picked up my Bible yet, nor do I believe he's like the King of Kings, like the ruler, you know, the head of the top of the army.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm praying to Christ. I have a waterfall. All the salt in my body leaves at once, right? Right at the beginning of the ceremony. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I just did it. And now for like hours, I'm literally just getting rid of like the dead parasite body that's left in me. Like the body of it needs to leave. Its spirit is gone, but it's dead, right?
Yeah.
So I get so close to the end. And as I get so close to the end of this, the parasites in my legs start to become alive again. And they're like, oh my gosh, we're almost dead. So they start sucking like crazy, creating tons and tons and tons of salt. And all that salt goes up to my head. And that's when I started to observe this like black mass being built over me. And this, for the rest of the night, I had a terrible night. It's an artificially demonic, artificially dark and dense energy that was like closing in on me. It felt like bricks were crushing my body. And I literally called my brother. I'm like, I might die. Like, I have no idea what's going on. I got into some like alchemy that I didn't understand. I didn't know the risks, all this other stuff. My brother flies out like the next day to come get me. But before that happens, I'm still sitting in the peyote ceremony, and the Murakami, which is that's the name for a master peyote healer. The Murakami does a healing on me, and he grabs his like feathers to like, and he wafts like a bit of my spirit off of me to assess what's going on. And this is what's the super cool thing about like spiritual doctors or shamanism, you know, is that they don't really ask you like your symptoms because it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. That's not the root of the disease. They do the assessment on the root of the disease through their spiritual insight, and they have their different methods of being able to diagnose it. For the Eggman, it was through eggs. For the people in the southern Amazon, it was through the Yawanki potato. For this guy, it's through his like feathers. And he took his feathers, and then with his feathers, he like held them up to my chest and took a tiny sip of my spirit. And this guy, by the way, he's known for being able to suck spirits out of people, process them into rocks, like crystallize them and spit them out. But he takes this tiny sip just to see what's going on, like, and like projectile vomits. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just killed this old man. And he's like vomiting and vomiting and vomiting. Like, I could tell he's like, I don't think he's ever felt something this evil before.
So he's physically vomiting. He's not spiritually vomiting. Physically
vomiting, and it sounds like rocks. I'm like in too desperate of a state to even be able to observe what's going on.
Okay.
I can hear rocks hitting the ground, like a lot of rocks out of a whiff of what I was going through, right? And he's crying for me, and he starts talking to his assistant, and his assistant starts crying. I'm like, what is going on?
Oh my gosh.
I'm crying. Why are you guys crying?
Yeah.
And the assistant is translating for me, saying he wants to offer you a healing. I've never even seen this done before. Or there's only 2 Murakamis in the world that we know of that can actually do this, but we're going to fast for 5 days. And on the 5th day, he's going to try to get this thing completely out of you. And if he fails, this could kill you both. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's got to be a better way than risk my life trying to fight this thing.
Oh my gosh.
And so I'm like, I can't do that right now. I need to go home. My brother's coming in tomorrow or whatnot. So my brother flies in and he sees me like in a desperate state where I'm like covered in eggs, like trying
Hey,
to
wait, Kate. Okay, you got to pause and let everyone know what that means, because it's not like you're cracking eggs all over you. Like, tell them exactly how there are eggs all over you, because I don't.
So I wore like runner leggings
Yes.
and shoved eggs in my leggings, right? Because the parasites they were generating the salt from my legs. The only ones left were in my legs. So if I put all these eggs in my leggings, then all the salt went into the eggs and the eggs kind of blocked the salt from going up to my head. And I didn't want any more salt in my head because that's where the problem was,
Yeah.
So my brother sees me legit, like I can't walk around town without like 24 eggs in my pants.
Just, I've heard of a lot in my 25 years of alternative healing. That one almost takes the cake. That one is an interesting one. I could imagine that if I were in the similar state as you and one of my sisters or brother had come to grab me, you understandably, you can understand why they might be worried.
So my brother is like, dude, I don't know what's going on, but whatever it is, like he's like, I can't help you. I can only just be with you. Right.
Yeah.
Well, he ends up flying me back to Colorado to my home. And when I get back home, I'm still having terrible demonic attacks. I'm still covered in eggs. I'm still like really suffering. Every time I try to eat, the parasites are feeding off of whatever I'm eating. And so at this point, for over the last month, I'd only had like 5 meals or something. I had lost 30 pounds. And I was like, I felt like my body was withering. Physically, I was weak. Spiritually, I felt broken, And I was like, when is this going to end? I was hitting rock bottom. And as I hit rock bottom, I laid in bed one night and there was this like smoky dragon. And I don't know, like in Revelation, the final book of the Bible, it says that the devil's going to come as a dragon. So this is like the devil himself, literally is like coming to me. And in my sleep, I'm feeling like I'm being choked. It's like if I close my eyes, I'm being choked. So I can't even close my eyes. And at this point, I'm so desperate. I'm calling my friend. I'm like, hey, can you help me get back to Mexico? I want to go do this 5-day healing with the Murakami. Like, I'm willing to risk my life because I feel like I'm going to die anyways. Mm-hmm. Right. And he's like, okay, but tonight, just chill out, read your Bible or something. At this point, I hadn't picked up my Bible at all. And he tells me, read your Bible or something and keep your mind off of it. If you can't sleep, just stay up all night reading. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you think the freaking Bible is going to work? I was like, I've done everything. I've done literally everything. The Bible is going to work. And then I thought back, I was like, the Murakami said we would do 5 days of offerings before we ask from the spirits. And at this point, Jesus had saved my life. He saved my life during the peyote ceremony. He saved my life during when he like slayed the dragon,
Yeah.
During the previous peyote ceremony. So at this point, he had saved my life multiple times. And I'm like, I felt like my protection, my angels had just left me. Right. I'm like, I'm going to read the Bible. I'm going to give an offering to Christ. And in that moment of deciding to read the Bible, like instant healing, I received an instant healing. And I stayed up all night from like midnight until like 5 a.m. just reading the Bible. And as I read, it was like projectile parasites flying out of me. Now, everything that I had done up until this point took effort, and it was fighting, and it was get this thing out of me, and it was pushing, and it was expand my spirit and my love and my breath. And at this point, all I had to do was open the book and read. And it was effortless. And I ended up getting to the 2nd chapter of Mark, where the Pharisees are questioning Jesus, like, why aren't you fasting? Why aren't you and your disciples fasting? And Jesus is basically saying, hey, they don't have to fast. They're in the presence of Christ, And I'm like, oh my God, I'm in the presence of Jesus. I'm in the presence of Jesus. And I'm like super pumped up as I'm reading this. I'm like, I'm going to go try some food. And I get one tiny piece of broccoli, like a tiny broccoli floret. And I put this in my mouth. And for the first time in 8 months, no reaction, completely protected. The parasites couldn't feed off of it at all. And that whole night, I'm like feasting through my fridge, like rebuilding my strength physically while I'm reading the Bible the whole time.
I'm just
And
getting
that,
this vision of you like sitting on your bed reading and in stuffing food, like just like for the first time. Because if you've only had 5 meals in a month, like your body's literally starving.
starving. Yeah. Yeah. I texted my friend that night. I was like, I need to go back to Mexico. My body is withering.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dying. I'll die from malnutrition if this keeps up any longer, and I won't have any effort to keep fighting. But this new method of healing was not fighting at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't acknowledge that right away.
Mm-hmm.
I started reading my Bible, and I was receiving healing and healing and healing and healing as I was reading my Bible, but I hadn't fully surrendered to Christ, and nor did I fully even believe what I was reading in the Bible. I didn't know where the Bible had come from. I didn't know how it was assembled. So it's easy for me to dismiss stuff as like inaccurate and whatnot. But eventually what happened was I spent 7 days praying and fasting. And on the seventh day, as I'm praying to Christ, please heal me, he comes down to me in a vision. And as a star, he comes right above my chest and then starts to ascend. And as he ascends, all the parasites in my body are completely frozen. And they start to ascend with him. And he's showing me, he's like, I have full power, full authority in heaven and on earth. And this is like one of the last things he says to Matthew before he ascends, into heaven, or after he resurrects, and I read that and I'm like, that's great. I don't really fully believe that. I still thought Jesus was a prophet. I thought it was a healing prophet, but still a human. I didn't believe that God sent this celestial being, the light, the source of life, into somebody, into a person, so that light of the universe can speak to humans as a human to teach them how to live. And that ultimately is the essence of the Christian faith, is that Jesus wasn't just a person. He is the light of the world, and he has, as the light of the world, has full authority over all the darkness. And once I fully believed that and fully surrendered to him and stopped using mushrooms and stopped using dragon's blood, and I learned that ivermectin helped as well, and I was taking like 3 different types of teas and stuff, I literally threw it all away and surrendered myself completely to Christ. And that night, an angel came down, and for 3 hours, I was just being healed by this angel, like sucking all of the dark demonic energy out of me. And in that moment, I was healed so completely. I realized there was so much energy I didn't even know about, that I was a fool to think that I could have ever broken this curse or healed myself of this demon through my own effort and through my own accord. It was only through complete surrender to Christ that was strong enough to be able to heal me. And then when I finally laid my head down to rest after that angel healing, I had this like subconscious thought, like, I can't wait to help save other people. And in that moment, I was like woken up from my sleep, because like the breath of life came into my lungs, rushing air came into my lungs, and I felt a crack through my entire body. And it was the curse being broken. And that breath of life, I believe, is the Holy Spirit. It's what Jesus says, this is going to be my spirit living inside of you when you fully surrender to me, when you fully decide to be a disciple. And that was the end of the curse. From that day on, didn't have to work with any medicine, haven't had a concern about my health. I know I'm like fully protected through Christ, but he left just a tiny bit. I was healed like 99.9999% of the way. And that remaining like 0.1% or whatever was to hold me accountable to actually fulfilling the subconscious thought of wanting to save other people that I wanted to do in my heart. And when Jesus, the last part of the Gospels, when Jesus is talking to Peter, who denied him 3 times, when he's talking to Peter, he's like, Peter, do you love me? Peter says, of course I love you. And then Jesus says, then feed my sheep. He says it 3 times. Peter, do you love me? Of course I love you. Feed my sheep. He says a final time, feed my sheep. And that ultimately is like the part of the Bible where I really did not want to fulfill. It's like I didn't want to go out, and it was like, if you heal me, God knew that if he just healed me, I would have just been like, great, that story's a wrap. I'm done. I'm gonna go back to life as usual. I'm gonna go back to running my businesses, and I'm just gonna forget about all of this. It was like, no, I gave you back your life. Now you work for me, right? And that's why I'm here on this podcast. That's why I wrote the book Healed by Faith and started my own podcast, Healed by Faith, is to be able to share with people how to heal themselves of chronic illness and disease through the spiritual means. And while not everything in this world, obviously not every disease is a curse, right? Nor is every disease a demon. Maybe it's not even a dark entity at all. Maybe it's truly just plainly physical. But I do believe that God can heal anything, whether it's on your spiritual layer or your physical layer. And if you follow the principles that I learned through this process, then you can heal yourself of any disease. I don't think there's any that's incurable.
It's, like with this ending, because you kind of sped through it a little bit, because I know more of the story. And I know that when Jesus finally came to you and then the angel came down, you were out in wilderness. Like,
yeah, I was.
You were not just at home. Like, you decided to go and make a journey into like the wilderness, and your father came with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
He didn't want you to go. He knew he wasn't going to stop you, but he just wanted you to know he was there.
Yeah, it was such a blessing. I learned around the same time that I picked up my Bible, I also learned that mushrooms were by far the best medicine for me among the 3, between mushrooms, ayahuasca, and peyote, because mushrooms are the energy of rebirth, like decay and new life, right? And so the mushrooms would literally decay the spirit. It would decay it and bring it back into the earth. And then I would receive new life back into my body, and it restored my energy, right? And so as I learned about Christ, I also was learning about mushrooms. And so I didn't give up right away on the mushrooms. I was like, my logic was like, if someone had cancer, would they stop chemo and put their full faith in Christ? It's like, this is my medicine. I know that it works. So but the problem is I put more faith in mushrooms than I put in Jesus. I didn't believe that Jesus could fully do it on his own. And it wasn't until I threw away the mushrooms too. But the reason why my dad came out was because he knew I was like, I'm going in the wilderness and I'm going to try to beat this with mushrooms. He's like, my son is going to get lost in the woods.
Yeah, that's so funny. Wise father, very wise father.
Wise father, right? So I got to thank my dad so much. He drove all the way through the night from Wisconsin to Colorado and showed up at my campsite. Like, he knew where I was from, like, Find My Friends or whatever. And he showed up to my tent and was there with me. And from that day on, we actually went down to New Mexico. And for the next 2 months, it was just like integrating this whole journey that I had gone through. So for 2 months, I was just camping between New Mexico, Arizona, and California. And then eventually I was like, okay, it's time for me to like really get back home, get into routine again, and focus on the mission that God called me to do. And that calling, by the way, the way this all started was with a calling from God. That first ayahuasca ceremony, that calling was to be able to learn how to heal people and to go teach people how to heal themselves. And that's it. So he's like, that ultimately is how you're gonna never have to deal with this curse ever again. Or this.
About a year, I think it was a year ago, I had this woman on, Katie, maybe it was even 2 years ago, I can't remember, but she's been on again since just like maybe 2 months ago on the podcast. But she healed herself through her belief in God and surrendering to God,
Mm-hmm.
and allowing God to heal her, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to her trying to juice, to, do all the different things that she thought she, whatever it was, breath work, meditation. And I don't want to say that any of that stuff is wrong or bad, like they're all tools. They're great. But ultimately, when your faith is not centered in the space where it needs to be centered, which is
Mm-hmm.
ultimately that which creates us,
Mm-hmm.
because like that is where all the good stuff is, right? Like that's where all the nectar to your life is. And so when you start to stray, you start to believe that you need something outside of you, or you need to create it, versus just surrendering
Mm-hmm.
to the actual force that created you and hold your own lifeline. It was interesting. She healed herself, and that is something that she teaches others as well. And so I think it's so important. Like, I mean, I've talked about surrender a lot on the podcast in the last couple of months, and how important that is. And I've talked about it even in my own recent last ceremony with ayahuasca, where I surrendered to ayahuasca,
Mm-hmm.
which was just a divine intelligence that I knew was going to be smarter than me in that moment. I was like, I'm just going to get out of my own way and let you show me, like, not me try to control this, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a similar thing, but just not going to the level that you went to. And ultimately, I think there's something so powerful in the act of surrender that goes well beyond what I think even any of us can truly conceive, even when we've done it. It's it's so powerful because, and it's so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It can be so difficult to initiate and truly embrace, because our world teaches us that we're in control, that
Mm-hmm.
you do that, you do this, it's the me, it's the me, it's the me.
Yeah.
And surrender is a very feminine energy. It's of the divine. And as a woman who grew up feeling like she needed to be more masculine in order to be
Mm-hmm.
powerful in this world, to be respected, to be seen, to, all of these things, really reconnecting with the feminine energy, I have to say surrender, I think, has been my most interesting uh journey of redefining my relationship with what that actually entails and what that actually means
Mm-hmm.
for not just me, but for the human spirit in general.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're saying is so true. Like surrender comes from humility, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that we think that we can do it on our own, like we have the power to do it on our own. But surrender is admitting, like, I threw up my hands. I was like, I can't do it. Like, Christ, I know you can. So please help me because I'm powerless in this situation. And that was, I mean, that to get to that point requires a lot of humility. So humility
And exhaustion.
and exhaustion, right? I did hit rock bottom like multiple times. I was humbled over and over and over again. And oftentimes the reason why God tests us is to humble us. Same reason why he kept like Israel in the desert for 40 years. Moses had like the final things that Moses was saying to Israel was like, why did God bring you in the desert for 40 years? He said to humble you and to test what's in your heart. Right.
Yeah.
And so um humility is the gateway to lasting faith. Like humility is required in order to be able to put your full faith in God. When you think that you can still fix it on your own or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you're actually blocking the healing miracle that you're asking for.
Well, because it's coming from a place of separation, right? You've separated yourself, whether you realize it or not. I think it's kind of unconscious in a way, but you've literally separated yourself from source, energy, God, that is what created everything,
Mm-hmm.
including us. And so I think that that's one of the reasons. And you know, what I what I think is so intriguing and special about your story and your journey is how acquainted you became with these incredibly powerful dark forces.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I remember you telling me of a scene where that thing that had wings that came, that when you said, oh, I have a mark on me, and that's when you realize this is a curse, and this thing came in, that when you were trying to clear work, it would bring its wing out and like cover your eyes.
Yeah. I mean, for several months, I had a demon wing on my face. And every time I would exhale, I would feel this demon wing on me. And yeah, I mean, I had to study. Like for me, I studied like how does this thing work? And I worked with so many different medicines. Everything was just trial and error, you know. It's how the indigenous people work too, is kind of like figuring it out through trying stuff and seeing what works and what doesn't work, what's helping and what's not working. You start with a little of something, and then if it works, you ramp it up, you know. Um, but ultimately, if you like, you can go about it that way. And honestly, there's a lot of good benefits can happen through that as well. Or you can completely like surrender, which sometimes is equally as hard, you know.
It
And
is.
truly, like I believed in God, and I felt like I prayed to God and gave it to God like for months and months and months. I was in constant prayer. Um, it really wasn't until I started to build a relationship with Christ, and that to me was probably the most surprising part of the story and the most significant, you
Mm-hmm.
know. It's
Mm-hmm.
that like if you like if you really need a miracle in your life and nothing else has worked, like for me, then I encourage you to pick up your Bible and really learn who Christ is, and then begin to like dedicate your life to following his path and like surrender yourself. He says, anyone who wants to follow me, deny your life, pick up your cross and follow me. You know, it's like deny your life, whatever. I felt like I had a path in life that I really was going down and things were going well. And when I started this journey, you know, I was making plenty of money and life seemed good and whatnot. But he's like, no, you're going to give it up and you're going to serve me now. And I also believe that through that, I'm still going to be able to create an amazing life for myself. And it's actually going to be better and more fulfilling
Mm-hmm.
than it would have been otherwise.
A few weeks ago, I put out a video on the stages of awakening, and the final stage of awakening, which is like a ninth stage. It's your path to liberation, and it's when you realize that you are in service on behalf of the divine, right?
Mm-hmm.
On behalf of Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
God. You know, like you're serving the greater whole, but you're doing the work on behalf of this pure energy source. And when you're coming from that place, there's definitely a certain level of humility that is, it's almost like it's not even that you created or whatever. It's just, it's part of you now, because you understand that there's so much more power in the work that you're connected to. But it's like, you're not saying to people, follow me. You're saying to people, follow this path home, which is
Mm-hmm.
for you, you're saying it's Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are a lot of misleading guides out there, leaders who will say, no, follow me and I'll get you to God. Or, you know, like I'll get you to, like, kind of like they're the middleman, you know, and like
Uh-huh.
it's not, everyone's going to have their own way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just whoever's really resonating with your story and your journey and that light. I mean, my podcast in my audience, we were a lot more spiritually based than religious, but I have a lot of Christians in my community who are, or even if they're not Christian, they're very much tuned into Jesus and Jesus's teachings and have tremendous respect. And so I think sometimes in this world, we believe that, oh, in order to be connected to Jesus, I need to take this path or that path. And ultimately, it's just Jesus, like just connect with Jesus, and you're good.
Yeah.
And so I think I love your story because of the faith component. I think being able to literally give it up to God, okay, is we hear that saying so often, but we don't really understand the power behind it. And to be able to surrender, I think anyone who's really truly wanting is in a place where they need to heal, which a lot of us are, just maybe different varying levels. Really look at redefining your relationship with the word surrender, the vibration of surrender, like what it actually means, because it's not about giving up power. It's actually about giving up control. And the control is what holds you back from your innate power that comes through your connection with God, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, if you could leave the audience with an important message on what you feel is going to be helpful to them if they're in this particular position like you have been, maybe not to the same level, but who knows, maybe someone is. What would you like to share with them?
Well, I'd love to share like the steps to healing that I discovered, because one of the gifts of that black mass in my head that I was telling you about is that I can now literally feel the energy of healing and the energy of prayers all the time throughout my day. And so I was able to, like, through cause and effect, study the energy of healing and create what I'm using as like a framework to teaching people how to heal spiritually. So do you mind if I take some time
No,
to
please do. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. So the very first thing, just like in my journey, is to have faith. Like God showed me straight up, he's like, I exist, believe in God. And the number one commandment is love God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul, right? That's what God wants. It's like, how much time do you spend every day in meditation, intentionally loving on God? For me now, it's like a constant conversation that's always happening, right? But how much are you taking that time to just love on God and believe in him? So faith, absolute certainty that you will get through this, that you will be healed, and that God can do it, and that Christ can heal you. That's step number one. Step number two is humility. Like you said, you have to fully surrender, right? And you have to have humility of mind, meaning like, I don't know it all. I'm willing to learn. You have to have humility of heart, meaning I can't do it all. I need you, God. And then you have to have humility in your actions of like, I'm not going to live for myself. I'm going to live for my higher power. I'm going to live for your purpose, not my own, right? The third step is then repentance. And repentance is literally how we sweep shop. This is how you get rid of all the darkness, how you move energy. And the key to repenting is repenting with all your heart, really feeling the sorrow and really meaning it when you're repenting, to the point where you should be moving energy, tears, like crying, snot dripping down your nose. When you're moving energy like that, you're literally purging disease out of your body in that moment, right? That when you take plant medicine, you hear of people purging, vomiting or crying or the snot dripping out or whatever. That is literally the disease leaving your body. So you need to repent and move yourself emotionally to the point of that. And the thing that people, especially if you're seeking healing, can oftentimes miss or do wrong is repenting because you want to be healed. You don't repent because you want something. You have to repent out of the genuine, sincereness of your heart, right? And
Do you mind? I'm just because I know that the repenting may trigger some people in the audience. Because for me, let me offer like just another word to use, not because your word's wrong, but just so like for some people who may be triggered by it, that the way I see repenting is clearing out what is false, like clearing out of your field what is not true. So, for instance, the beliefs of I'm not good enough, the belief of I am, a bad person, or all like your trauma, your pain, like all those kinds of things. It's really being ready to let go of it and not carry it anymore, not because you're just tired of carrying it, but because you're truly seeing yourself as the light is illuminating the truth for you.
Yeah. And the way I would describe it is like, it's confessing the things that you have done wrong. We all know what we've done wrong, and all of us have done wrong in the past, but confessing it and asking for forgiveness,
Yeah.
that's basically it. And the thing is, like, in I know, like, in the Catholic Church, they have confession where you say it to the priest. You don't have to say it to anyone. You say it to God. It's between you and God. Go confess what you've done, and he will forgive you when you give it up to him. And you're like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to act this way anymore. Help me.
And
Right.
and I'm glad you said that, because that's important, because at the end of the day, the forgiveness component is really difficult for someone to really understand how to forgive themselves. Because if you're not willing, if you don't know how to forgive yourself, you cannot be able to forgive others. And it's like when I was trying to heal from my sexual trauma as a child, with my abuser, that it wasn't until I saw what he had gone through, where his own abuse, that I understood that had he not done that, he would have never done it to me. And I understood his pain, and I understood that it was his pain causing him to act. And so through that, I was able to like forgive him. But before I could even get to that stage of being able to forgive him, I had to go through all the forgiveness for myself. I had to forgive, like, Nicole, you were 5 or 6 years old. Like, forgive yourself for not telling your parents, like, forgive yourself for thinking you did something to deserve that, like, it wasn't your fault. And there's so much shame and blame and guilt that we carry that isn't necessarily ours. And we need to learn how to forgive that. Now there are things that, like you said, we do, but we have to have the capacity to forgive ourselves so we can forgive others. And that to me is like part of the repenting process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a story in the Bible that says you must forgive your brother and your sister, and you must forgive your neighbor so that your father can forgive you.
Yeah.
Right? And that's exactly the next step of the process. That's step 4. So we've got faith, we've got humility, we've got repentance, and then we have forgiveness. And this is where you forgive others so you can be forgiven. And I use a technique called the ho'oponopono. I know I'm butchering the name of that, but it's a Hawaiian prayer from a Hawaiian shaman. He, using the ho'oponopono, he healed like tons of people from this prison that was like, unfixable. And he never even met with a single person. He literally said this prayer to them and was able to heal their spirits through his prayer. So I've actually healed a lot of my relationships with other people through the ho'oponopono. They don't even know what I'm doing, but it's like I will repeat the ho'oponopono many, many times for them until they no longer feel anger to me. And this is actually a guard. This is one of the most important things too, is when you pray for someone else who has anger towards you, you're like, by returning good, when someone does evil on you and you return it with good, that is like one of the most powerful things that you can do in order to just crush darkness. And so The way the Ho'oponopono works is you literally, you repeat this as if God is speaking through you, but you say it like, I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, thank you. I'm sorry. And you really mean it. I love you so much. Please forgive me. Thank you. And you repeat that over and over again. And it's so powerful. Like, I encourage everyone who has any type of bitterness with anybody in their life to just repeat that prayer and to really mean it. And once you do that, then you're ready to receive, which is the next step. That's when God starts to be able to really move light through you. And at this point, I can feel the energy as it moves through my body, but you should also be able to feel it too. At this point, we're just sitting with that peace, that blessing of receiving the forgiveness of God. He's literally cleansing the darkness from your body at that point. And you should feel that blessing and appreciate that blessing and love that blessing. And at that point, you're now prepared to give, and you spread that blessing to other people, and you start praying for everyone else. Literally, whatever, your friends, your family, whatever's going on in their life, just start praying for them. I know this person's going through this thing right now. I hope that they get better. I hope they make it through it or whatever. And just pray for other people. And what I realized is, because I can feel the power of prayers, what I realized is that when people prayed for me, I felt it. When I prayed for someone else, I felt it even stronger. When we mutually prayed for each other on a regular basis, there's like a link that happens spiritually where it's like, there's so much, the power of the blessing when you're praying, when two people are praying for each other is like 10x. It's really awesome. And then once you're in this state of purity, this is when you can start to ask for things that you want in your life. This is where you set your goals or your dreams, or God, help me with this, or do this, like help me with abundance. God wants abundance for all of us. Set things like that. And then ultimately I always end these prayers, these meditations with the glorification of God. I started with that and I ended with that. It's like, thank you, God, you've done so much for me. You've created this entire world. You are all powerful, loving on God, glorifying him, because ultimately that is his number one purpose for creating us as humankind, is to glorify him. And when we do that, we receive a lot of healing. So
I feel like as you were saying all that, like one of the reasons in this particular world, in this reality, why it's so hard for people to receive the full blessing of that offering is because we're taught from such a young age that we're not good enough, and we're not good enough, one, through like media, through all these different things, that show us, cause us to compare ourselves to others or against things where we could be more. But then also, there's, on the flip side, there's this idea of the martyr complex too, which I think is a trap spiritually for a lot of people to fall into, in the sense that when you're in service on behalf of the divine, you're not meant to martyr yourself. Like, you have to be able to receive in order to give as well. As much as in order for you to give, you need to be able to receive, because there's a constant flow of energy. It's constantly replenishing itself. It's infinite. But if you block the flow, then you're not allowing for the energy to move through you in the way that it needs to. And so, like, I think that so many people struggle with even the ability to receive that offering, because they just deep down don't even believe that they're worth it. And that's why the journey of healing and learning how to love yourself is so important, because it teaches you how to reconnect back with the ultimate power.
Yeah. And man, that journey never ends.
No, it doesn't end. It's ongoing. It's ongoing.
Yeah. That journey never ends. You can use the Ho'oponopono on yourself, by the way, which is great. Like,
no,
I'm sorry,
I agree.
I love you. I love Clark, which is really powerful. But even now, like just the other day, I was thinking back of the last year. I'm like, man, I haven't made progress in like my business, my career, all this stuff. And I was like, man, I wish I was in a different place, in life. I sincerely thought that. I was like, man, the last year I was sick. My life crashed down around me. And then I thought to myself, I was like, you know what? Screw that. I'm proud of where I'm at simply because I chose this path in the first place. It was one of the most healing meditations I've had. Like, was just like, I'm proud just for being on this path, doesn't matter what my life conditions are like
Yeah.
right
I mean, listen, we are human beings here, right? And we're in this reality that is constantly programming us with like, you want more. No, don't you want this? And there's
now.
nothing wrong with any of it. But when it's your motivation, when your motivation is to want something, in order to have it, it's like, that's when things start to go wrong. Like that's when like things start to veer off the course. Like there's nothing wrong with having abundance or having things come to you or anything like that, but it's what's driving you. What's your motivational force? Like that's where you can start to find yourself going down paths that are going to eventually lead you into darker lessons. But like when you are in this place of, I have everything, you're not in that place of lack anymore. So everything can come to you because you already have it. You're a vibrational match for it. But as soon as you go into like an I don't have, you now believe that you are in lack. And so now more lack just shows up. So, your journey is fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing it with the audience, and let them know about your book. And if they can, because I know you got a pre-order on your book right now.
Yeah, I do. So anyone who orders my book right now will receive a few like free bonuses. You can go to my website, Varin.com, to go get them. But one of the bonuses is a mini course on spiritual healing to get you started right away. So even if you don't have the book in hand, I start walking you through like, hey, these are the steps that need to take place. And like, this is what I did. And here's how I know it. This is how I know the stuff to be true. And then you also get a meditation, the guided prayer meditation that I did day and night that healed me more than anything else that I did was this guided prayer meditation. And it walks you through those steps that I told you about, the faith, humility, repentance, etc. Walks you through all of those steps in a meditation so that you can just repeat this over and over again. And as you do that, you renew your mind, and that ends up being what renews your body. So you can go to clarkvarin.com for that. And then you can also find my podcast, Healed by Faith, on Spotify and Apple Music.
Perfect. Well, I'll leave all those links in the show notes below. To my audience, I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and I hope you got a lot out of the journey that Clark has been on, because there are a lot of important teachings in here. There's not just one, there are many that apply to the spiritual journey and interacting with the spiritual realms, and also understanding how intricate this world is, of just even like what I love so much is how you were able to describe the different layers, and how like when we energetically are stressed and overwhelmed and buried in the material world, that, everything's compressed and nothing can move. But when we relax and we're still, everything can open up and start clearing things out. And I love that. And I think that's really important for all of you to keep in mind when you do hit those moments in your life where you're overstressed, you're overworking, you're constantly doing, you're not taking the time to just be, you're not taking the time to be still, to listen and observe. Observation is a very important part of this journey. So thank you so much, Clark, for coming on the show. And to anyone else out there, if you're still interested in coming to the Forbidden Journey retreat here in Breckenridge, Colorado, held on the 28th of September to October 1st, I'd love to have you there with just a couple tickets left. I am currently preparing all of the soul evolution analysis reports for each individual who is coming. And if you're interested in understanding what you may have brought in from another lifetime, what you've chosen to learn in this lifetime, all of that's going to be guided towards you for this journey and to help deepen your own healing process in the journeys and ceremonies that will take place in that weekend. I love you guys. Have an incredible week, and I'll see you next time. Thanks again for joining me for another show on the Enlighten Up podcast. I love you guys so much for all of your continued support. So remember to raise your vibe, find your tribe, and be open to the infinite possibilities held in the mysteries that surround us all. Thanks again for sharing the show with your family and friends. And if you're new to the show and you need to find out more information about me, please head on over to my website, NicoleFrolick.com, where you can join my newsletter. And please follow me on Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube. Keep your light bright, and I'll see you next week.